By the end of that week, one hallway clip and a stack of boring documents helped trigger a voluntary asset recovery on a $308,000 SUV, froze a fraudulent line of credit someone opened using my name, and shut down the family dynamic that almost killed me. I am Stephanie, 32, VP of Marketing in New York City. I thought I understood betrayal. I thought it showed up in whispers and awkward silences. In my family, it wore smiles, passed plates, and called me dramatic while my oxygen levels crashed in front of 100 people on a Boston rooftop. Here is what they did not know. I keep receipts, real ones, spreadsheets, transfers, contracts, screenshots, a permissioned Ring camera the venue manager let me mount in the service hallway for vendor coverage during my brother's gender reveal. I knew Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so I never treated that audio as court evidence. It became context and leverage. The proof that mattered would be clinical records, EMT notes, bank forensics, and signatures that were not mine. If you have ever been the responsible one who pays the bill because it is easier than arguing "tell me where you are watching from," this part is for you. I am the responsible one. The planner, the fixer, the girl who left our Wellesley suburb on scholarships and side hustles, worked through school, and climbed to a Manhattan corner office. My team calls me Steady Hands. At home, I was the funding model. For 2 years, I wired about 40% of my take-home to keep the peace, roughly $14,000 a month, sometimes more when emergencies stacked up. I did it quietly because the golden child narrative needs a quiet counterweight, and in our family, that was me. Names matter here. My father, Frank, loves a neat story and a golf tea time. My brother, Ryan, 27, is the idea guy. He says brand a lot and believes charisma closes deals. My Aunt Martha produces every family moment like an event. My sister Jessica, thank God, sees me clearly. She is the first person who will say, "That happened the way you remember it." My best friend Callie is my anchor. She texts me water, sleep, and screenshot in the same sentence. I made 3 mistakes that looked like love. First, I normalized transferring thousands every month and called it help. I even tracked it in a spreadsheet so I could true up at year's end. That spreadsheet will matter later. Second, I agreed to finance a Lamborghini Urus for optics because Ryan swore it would impress potential partners. Title and loan in my name. Insurance policy in my name. He was supposed to be an occasional listed driver. In reality, he became the primary driver, which is a coverage problem and a contract problem. That distinction will matter too. Third, I never signed any paperwork to borrow against my father's house. If you hear the words home equity line of credit and my name in the same sentence, the next word is forged. The rooftop night should have been easy. Seaport skyline, caterers, a DJ with a playlist I over-approved. I ran logistics because that is what I do best. I had the vendor contracts in a folder and spare chargers in a tote. I mounted that little ring cam in the service corridor with the general manager's blessing so we could track deliveries away from guests. I thought I was protecting cupcakes from disappearing. I was protecting my life. And because I am a marketer, let me set expectations. This story is not a scream. It is a timeline. It is a clean line from sacrifice to betrayal to awakening to consequences. Every few minutes, something you need will land. I will flag it. I will say this is important, or we will come back to that. I am not being dramatic. I am being precise. Here is the setup you need before everything breaks. My salary can carry the numbers you are about to hear. The transfers were mine. The car was mine. The monthly support was mine. The cultural script was also mine. The capable daughter funds the fragile piece while the golden son tries on futures. It looked familial. It functioned like a business with no books until I started keeping them. 2 more seeds to plant. I had already agreed with Jessica that if anything ever felt off, we would run facts, not feelings. Date, time, amount. We called it the timeline rule. And 2 weeks before the party, Callie said the sentence that would become my compass. If they joke about your boundaries, check what they get when you keep none. So when the night goes sideways, and it will, you will know why I moved the way I did afterward. You will understand why the audio clip was useful, but not the anchor, why the lender moved quickly once I stopped payments under counsel and showed contract violations, and why a calm letter through an attorney accomplished more than 1,000 screaming texts ever could. If you have lived inside a family story that cost you money, health, and a little piece of your voice, stay with me. By the end of the week, I am about to walk you through, I did not get an apology. I got my name back. And I did it without losing control. Looking back now, the rooftop wasn't the beginning. It was the bill coming due. I grew up in Wellesley learning 2 lessons at the same time. Make things look easy. Pay for the mess. Aunt Martha lined up 5 kinds of mustard like we were staging a magazine shoot, and I learned presentation before I learned permission. Ryan got the golden child glide path. charisma, big talk, late homework. I got the responsible child badge. Schedules, rides, essays in the passenger seat while Jessica slept on my shoulder. That split became our family operating system. He cast the vision. I covered the invoice. I left for college on scholarships and side gigs. No one saw the night shifts or the spreadsheets. They saw the tassel and asked if I could put the flights to Hawaii on my card so we could celebrate properly. I said yes because saying yes was the rent I paid for being the one who made it out. After grad school, I moved to New York, climbed from coordinator to VP in 8 years, and learned to speak fluent ROI. At home, success translated into a quiet monthly tithe. 40% of my take-home give or take. About $14,000 a month, sometimes more when emergencies multiplied. 2 years of it adds up to a number you feel in your bones. I tracked every transfer in a sheet labeled family support line items with dates, memos, and confirmation numbers. It was my way of telling myself there would be an audit one day, even if I never scheduled it. Here's the pattern, clean and honest. Dad would forward property taxes with a winking emoji and a story about the town getting greedy this year. Aunt Martha would text a temporary gala deposit with a promise that my name would be on the donor wall. Ryan would ping me from a payment app at 11:14 p.m. with the caption, "Client dinner can reimburse next week." Reimbursements almost never arrived. The asks were wrapped in pride. "We're so proud of you. It would mean the world. You're so good at this." Pride was the bow. Entitlement was the box. I made 3 big concessions that paved the road to the rooftop. First, I normalized large transfers and called it helping. I even trued up at year's end like a decent bookkeeper of someone else's dream. Second, I agreed to finance a Lamborghini Urus for brand optics because Ryan insisted it would close partnerships. Title in my name, loan in my name, insurance policy in my name. To make it at least technically correct, I listed him as an occasional additional driver. Over time, occasional blurred into daily. That's not just a sibling boundary issue, it's an insurance and contract issue. Third and most dangerous, I allowed my name and credit to become the family's master key. I never signed anything related to borrowing against Dad's house, but my name had become shorthand for approval. If Stephanie's on it, it's solid. That sentence is how forgeries get justified over brunch. Looking back now, the golden child versus scapegoat dynamic wasn't cartoonish. It was polite. Ryan wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. He was a man raised to believe good luck would meet him halfway, and I would cover the rest. Dad wasn't cruel. He was casual. He believed in stories where his choices had soft landings. Aunt Martha didn't think of herself as an enabler. She thought she was a producer making sure the show went on. I was the quiet CFO of all that production. Every few months, there would be a moment that should have made me change the rules. Christmas, when I bought Dad a new set of golf clubs, and he posted a thank you to Ryan for arranging everything. A summer dinner where Martha told the table a story about me crying at 12 as proof that I'm still dramatic at 32, and everyone laughed like it was harmless. Ryan looking at my watch and saying must be nice while requesting another transfer for a bridge expense. Tiny cuts you learn to breathe around. But breathing around cuts is how you miss a wound. Callie kept me honest. She'd text water sleep screenshot like a mantra, and 2 weeks before the gender reveal when we were going over timelines for vendors, and I was printing extra copies of contracts because venues always misplace something, she said, "If they joke about your boundaries, check what they get when you keep none." That sentence met me where love and math live in the same cell. I also have a habit that turned into a lifeline: consent and documentation. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, so I don't record audio without permission. If there's a camera, someone in charge signs off. I ask for it in writing. It's annoying in the moment and priceless later. For family money, I keep everything boring. Confirmations, memos, device alerts. I use 2-factor on financial apps, and I read login notifications not because I'm paranoid, but because marketing trained me to respect logs. Logs don't lie. People do. Now, about the Urus. On paper, the arrangement was justifiable. He'd be an occasional driver listed on my policy with mileage caps we discussed and a location sharing toggle we both turned on. In practice, Ryan treated the car like a tour laminate. It was parked in his driveway, photographed at his lunches, tagged by friends. I asked for odometer updates. He sent photos late or not at all. Insurance expects you to update them when an occasional driver becomes the primary one. Lenders expect the titled borrower to be the primary user. Those weren't abstract rules. They were conditions I ignored because family. That gap between paper and practice is where lenders get to move fast once you stop paying under counsel and show violations. I didn't know I would need that leverage, but my future self was already building it. Looking back now, the HELOC was foreshadowed too. Dad's house is in his name. Any legitimate line of credit would require his signature, and if I were a co-borrower, my explicit verifiable consent. I never gave it. What I did do, as the de facto tech support of our family, was help set up his online banking years ago. I told him to leave e-statements on and to keep the mailing address consistent. He turned paper back on because he likes envelopes. Later, I would learn how a 30-day mailing address switch plus a forged signature can create a window where disclosures miss the right eyes. But at this stage, it's just context my name had become a passcode in their heads. On paper, it isn't. Jessica is the reason there was a timeline rule before there was a crisis. When you feel gaslit, she said, facts are an oxygen tank. So we started a shared note with a simple template date what happened, who was there follow-up. Not emotional scorekeeping, just a log. We added silly things too, like Aunt Martha's party themes and Ryan's shifts in business model descriptions from week to week. It kept us grounded and unintentionally trained me to narrate events exactly when it mattered most. The last week before the party looked like every family production I've ever carried. I flew into Boston, went straight to the Seaport venue and did load-in, because that's the job no one names, but everyone expects. The general manager handed me a vendor badge, and when I asked, gave written permission to mount a battery ring cam in the service corridor, so trays and equipment could be tracked off the guest path. I label everything. I over-communicate. I also eat after everyone else is fed because I was raised to think chairs at the table are earned with sweat, not birth order. That mindset keeps events running. It also keeps unhealthy systems alive. Then came the one more thing, texts. Dad with a tax bill he forgot to mention. Aunt Martha with an upgraded floral invoice to match the skyline. Ryan with a request for a last-minute content crew he promised would pay off. Looking back now, those 3 messages were the sacrament of our pattern. The patriarchal shrug, the producer's escalation, the golden child's pitch. My response was the ritual too. Sure, I'll handle it. This is important. I am not telling you I was a doormat. I am telling you I was a builder. I built a working family out of favors and deposits and late-night phone calls. I built stability with wires and grace. The problem with building alone is that no one else learns how to carry weight. The problem with paying every invoice is that no one else sees the cost. So when my chest tightens on a service hallway later and my father's voice will dismiss what my body knows, it won't be an isolated cruelty. It will be the purest expression of the story we've been telling each other for years, that my job is to absorb, to smooth, to pay, to keep breathing, no matter what. Part 1 gave you the frame. The Seaport rooftop felt like a commercial. Sunset gold, string lights, a skyline that makes people say this city out loud. I was in the service corridor with a vendor badge around my neck and a checklist on my phone doing the invisible job that keeps visible moments pretty. The venue manager had signed off on the battery ring cam, so it watched the hallway where deliveries came and staff slipped through. I had set it for motion-triggered clips. Video with incidental audio, not court evidence, context, insurance for trays and timing. That distinction matters. The first breadcrumb was stupid and small. Martha's Instagram story. A slow pan of the skyline, and then me pale lugging cases of sparkling water. Caption CEO of drama with a wink. People laughed at it in our family chat. I put my phone down. Another vendor had arrived, and timing eats feelings when you're the one in charge. Breadcrumb 2 came 10 minutes later, fast and mean. I bent to adjust a crate, and my chest felt like it caught a wire. Sharp on the inhale. Heavy on the exhale. Not panic, not dehydration, something else. I stepped into the service hallway, leaned on the wall, and tried to land a breath that didn't land. Ryan walked by, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist like he was a doctor in a TV show, and smirked. Here we go again. Martha popped her head in and said, "Powder your nose, honey, you look half dead on camera." I said I can't breathe. My father's voice slid in from behind me, conversational as golf. Quit faking it. I remember thinking 2 things at once. That sentence is going to age badly. And the camera got that hallway. Another breadcrumb. Overheard because the universe sometimes does you the favor of being obvious. On my way back to the floor, while I was willing my lungs to behave, I passed Ryan telling a friend she'll pick up the tab. She always does. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't ashamed. It was a law he'd never had to test. Then the moment that cracked the room in half, someone yelled for EMTs. The tone changed. Get the stretcher now, cut through the DJ's playlist like a blade. The hallway tilted. Hands were on my shoulders. Jessica's face swam into focus. "We're going to the hospital," she said, and because she knows me better than anyone, she added, "I'm logging the times." Timeline rule. Date. Time. Amount. Who said what? She squeezed my hand and kept talking so I could follow her voice out of the panic and into procedure. In the ambulance, a paramedic clipped a reader on my finger and another band around my arm and spoke to me in numbers. Breathing shallow, heart fast. We're here. We're moving. I held on to Jessica's voice and the numbers like they were a rope. I could feel the edges of my life pressing in. People use the word dramatic for that feeling when they've never actually had to bargain with air. At the ER, the doctor said 3 words that made time thin out. Pulmonary embolism, then 2 more. Fatal if delayed. They moved me into a room that smelled like bleach and purpose. Catheter-directed therapy. Monitors talking to each other. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them. I will always remember the number. Later, I would request the patient summary and the EMT run sheet. The screenshot with the oxygen saturation in red would become one of the calmest pieces of proof I've ever held. While I was stabilized and half awake, the next breadcrumb hit my phone because boring systems save you. I have credit monitoring tied to my own email, separate from my father's accounts. At 9:42 p.m., I got an alert, new hard inquiry reported. Lender type home equity line of credit. I blinked at the screen until the letters arranged themselves into a sentence I could understand. Someone had used my name to try to borrow against a house that isn't mine. I couldn't do anything from a hospital bed except screenshot it and send it to the shared note Jessica and I keep. She typed back 3 words. We saw this. When I could breathe enough to sit up, I opened my banking app and ran a quick search on memos. Family reimbursement. Vendor. Delivery. Across the last 10 days, 3 transfers totaling $17,800 had moved to Ryan's account. The timestamps overlapped with event prep. None of those amounts matched invoices I had in my vendor folder. This is important. I had previously sent regular support transfers, so nothing about the mechanism was illegal on its face. What changed was intent and timing. The labels were false, the amounts were padded, and one of those transfers had processed while I was sedated. Jessica had my phone at the hospital. I had not authorized anything. I screenshotted everything. I didn't call the bank yet. I built the file first. The cousin breadcrumb arrived with a sting. A message from a number I barely recognized. You didn't get this from me. Attached were screenshots of the extended family chat. Martha had posted her story. Someone, an in-law, typed, "She always makes it about her." Another replied, "Should have let her sleep it off." Then the line that knocked the wind out of my freshly treated lungs. Honestly, if she stopped breathing, it would save us all money in the long run. Time-stamped, names visible. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I saved the thread, exported the chat, and wrote the exact time into the timeline note. When people show you what your life is worth to them, believe them the first time. I texted Callie from the hospital bed. Her reply came back in 1 minute like a checklist I knew by heart. Breathe, save everything. Freeze credit next. No confrontations, build the sequence. She knows my job and my family. She also knows what happens when emotion outruns proof. I asked Jessica to take a photo of my hospital bracelet with the date and time and to upload it into the folder with the credit alert and the transfer screenshots. We didn't need to be dramatic. We needed to be thorough. Sometime after midnight, the venue manager called Jessica to check on me and apologized for how the night had turned. She also confirmed something that mattered for the rest of this story. Yes, I had written permission to mount a camera in the service corridor. Yes, staff were notified. Yes, they'd hold the security footage on their end as well. Jessica wrote that into the note in plain language. Consent documented. In the morning, when the room calmed and the doctor rounded with the kind of steady tone that reassembles you, I tested my voice and asked basic questions. What happened? What do I need to know? What does recovery look like? Dr. Kwan explained clot risk complications and the one sentence that would stop every gaslighting attempt cold later. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. I asked if he would be willing to say that to my family on a call once I'd signed consent. He nodded. Of course. Here is where suspicion turned into certainty. It wasn't just that they minimized a medical crisis. It wasn't just a cousin's cruel joke. It was the stack of evidence on my phone that said my name had become an instrument. The HELOC inquiry, the mislabeled transfers, the normalization of me as the walking contingency plan, the confidence in the hallway. She'll pick up the tab. She always does. The system wasn't fraying. It was working exactly as designed, and it almost killed me. So I did what I do when a campaign goes sideways and a client wants to spin. I built a deck, except this time it was a folder. Timeline at the top. Hospital and EMT docs in one section. Financial records in another. Screenshots of the group chat and the IG story in a third. The ring clip labeled clearly as context. Not legal, context. I kept my notes dead simple: date, asset, action, source. I wrote, "Do not argue" at the top of the page and underlined it. Before noon, I called Alvarez, the attorney, a colleague swore by for financial crimes and identity issues. I didn't try to tell her my whole life. I told her what mattered. Medical crisis minimized in public. Credit inquiry for a HELOC I did not authorize. Transfers under false pretenses while I was hospitalized. Title and loan in my name for a vehicle used daily by someone else. Written permission for a camera that captured the hallway context. I asked for a consult. She said, "Bring your documents. We will walk through steps, not feelings." I hung up and looked at Jessica, who had stayed without my asking because that's who she is. We had built a timeline to survive family jokes. We had accidentally built a case. And standing there in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and purpose, I decided I wouldn't try to win anyone's heart back. I would protect my name. Morning in the ER felt too clean for what had happened. Antiseptic in the air, a monitor ticking like a metronome that refused to rush, sunlight on the floor in a hard rectangle. Sensory overload happens in small squares like that. You notice the shine on a tile before you let yourself notice the sentence the doctor said the night before: pulmonary embolism fatal if delayed. I asked for clarity, not comfort. Dr. Kwan walked me through what my body had just survived and what recovery would require. Then I signed a HIPAA consent so he could speak in front of my family. 2 hours later, we got on a video call. It was Jessica, me, my father, Aunt Martha, and Ryan. The doctor's tone was neutral and exact. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. No qualifiers, no jokes. He explained clot risk and discharge orders. He said I'd be okay if I rested and followed the plan. The screen was quiet. I didn't try to fill the silence. That was layer 1 of the reveal, the surface betrayal named and neutralized by a professional. The "she's dramatic" narrative could not survive a clinician with charts. Layer 2 went deeper and less noisy. Before lunch, I had a consult with Alvarez, the attorney, a colleague recommended for financial crimes and identity issues. I told her exactly what I knew, nothing more. Medical crisis minimized in public. A new hard inquiry for a home equity line of credit with my name on it that I did not authorize. Transfers labeled reimbursement and vendor that didn't match any invoices while I was hospitalized, and my phone was in Jessica's hand. A luxury SUV financed and insured in my name with an occasional driver who had become the daily one. A hallway clip that captured context but wasn't my legal anchor. She nodded as I talked organized, then laid out steps without drama. We opened a police report for identity theft and obtained a case number. With that number in hand, Alvarez called the lender that pulled the HELOC inquiry. We asked their fraud desk to place a provisional freeze on the application pending verification. They confirmed in careful corporate language that an application listing me as a co-borrower had been submitted and that a temporary mailing address change was on file for the property owner around the same window. They did not share IP specifics, and I didn't expect them to. What they did provide was a ticket number, a point of contact, and a list of documents they'd need to validate signatures. The notary log would be requested formally. We didn't need it that minute to stop motion. This is important. I'm not on the deed to my father's house. Any legitimate HELOC would require my explicit consent if I were truly a co-borrower. I never gave it. The freeze bought us time for the paperwork to prove that simple fact. Next, we spoke with my bank about the Zelle and Venmo transfers. Alvarez didn't promise miracles. Person-to-person transfers are hard to reverse when the account holder authorizes them. But we had something specific. I was sedated during one transfer. Device login alerts didn't match my usual pattern. Timestamps overlapped with hospital records, and we had a fresh police report for identity theft. The bank opened their own fraud case, flagged the transactions, and asked for device and IP logs. We provided the hospital admission and medication records to show I couldn't have initiated anything at those times. We didn't argue motive. We proved opportunity and access. Quietly, in sequence. Then we called the auto lender. Alvarez kept it clinical. Title and loan in my client's name. Policy in her name. Borrower listed as the primary user by contract. Evidence suggests the occasional driver has, in practice, become the primary one. We will be ceasing payments under counsel due to ongoing fraud concerns, and we are requesting voluntary asset recovery to preserve collateral while we reconcile usage violations. We provided exactly what they asked for: copies of the finance agreement, insurance declarations, and public posts showing location and daily use that contradicted the original arrangement. No theatrics. Contract language travels farther than righteous anger. I ate the sandwich Callie had Grubhubbed to the hospital and pulled up my family support spreadsheet. Layer 3, the pattern clicked into place like I'd been building toward it without knowing. 2 years of help tracked down to the day. Roughly $14,000 a month off my net spiking during events and milestones. Dad's property tax dumps accompanied by winking emojis. Aunt Martha's temporary gala deposits that never got reversed. Ryan's late-night client dinner requests that always became sunk cost. It wasn't the amounts that broke me in that moment. It was the shape. I had trained everyone to treat my earnings like a public utility and my goodwill like a bottomless line of credit. The rooftop hadn't created that behavior. It stripped the paint. The system underneath had been there all along. I pulled the pieces into a single folder and gave it a name that kept me calm. Timeline. I promised myself I would argue once on paper. I labeled assets clearly medical financial communications context and added a short note to the ring file venue permission on file. Massachusetts, two-party consent respected, for context and sequence only. That sentence kept me honest when I wanted to use that hallway moment as a cudgel. It was leverage in a conversation, not a star witness in court. The star witnesses would be my charts, my logs, my contracts, and my doctor. This is where the breadcrumbs you've been collecting click together. The IG story that called me CEO of drama earlier. It wasn't just rude. It set a tone that justified ignoring symptoms. The audio of my father saying, "Quit faking it." It wasn't my case. It was the cultural cover my family used to keep the system running. The cousins' group chat screenshot about saving money if I stopped breathing. It wasn't a stray cruelty. It was motive written out loud by people who thought the thread was private. The credit alert. It wasn't random. It was the moment the family's imagined access to my name tried to turn into a signed line of credit. The mislabeled transfers. They were the financial teeth of a dynamic that had always eaten quietly. In the late afternoon, Dr. Kwan called back for the family follow-up I requested. I stayed on mute except to confirm I had consented to him explaining the diagnosis directly. He repeated the sentence that would travel with me into every conversation that followed. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. You do not get to relabel that crisis as personality. He answered a few questions about recovery timelines and ended the call. No scolding, no shame. Just medical facts in a calm voice. It did more to close the gaslighting loop than any speech I could have given. I messaged HR next not to litigate family drama, but to document my medical leave properly and ensure my projects were covered. Separate track. Clean boundaries. The LinkedIn post about accountability and listening would come later as a professional reflection, not a subtweet. I had learned the hard way that channels matter. Internal for operations, public for principles, legal for consequences. Before the day ended, Alvarez sent me a short checklist. Freeze credit with all 3 bureaus. Change passwords and enable stronger 2-factor on banking and email. Pull my credit reports to identify any other inquiries in a 2-year window. Document every contact attempt from family and route anything substantive through counsel. I did the unglamorous work first. Phone calls, forms, screenshots saved with dates and file names. It felt like cleaning a kitchen after a fire, pointless until you see the counter appear. When the ward quieted and the monitors settled into their night rhythm, I stared at the same rectangle of sunlight now turned gray and thought about the sentence I have lived with since childhood, make things look easy. The revelation was simple and heavy. I had made survival look easy for everyone. I was done performing ease. I would perform accuracy. That is a different show. I didn't go home and explode. I opened my laptop in the hospital, ate the sandwich Callie sent, and built a plan with Alvarez that ran on documents, not adrenaline. Step 1 was perimeter. Alvarez filed an identity theft police report. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, pulled a tri-merge report, changed every banking and email password, strengthened 2-factor, and shut off every family support auto payment. Not dramatic, just a closed valve. We stopped the HELOC attempt next. Using the police case number, Alvarez called the lender's fraud desk and requested a provisional freeze on an application listing me as co-borrower. They confirmed an application existed, restored the standard mailing address, opened an investigation, and asked for signature verification materials and the notary journal. I'm not on the deed to my father's house. Any legitimate line would require my explicit consent. I never gave it. The freeze enforced that fact. For the mislabeled Zelle and Venmo transfers, Alvarez set expectations reversals are rare when the account holder authorizes them. Our angle was different. Several transfers were time-stamped while I was sedated, did not match invoices in my vendor folder, and showed login activity outside my normal pattern. We provided the police report, hospital admission and medication logs, and device data. The bank opened a fraud case, placed holds on disputed amounts, and began device log analysis. A few provisional credits landed within days. Others stayed under review. No victory laps, just leverage. Then the car, title, and loan are in my name. By contract, the borrower is the primary user. Evidence showed the occasional listed driver had become the daily one. Under counsel, I ceased payments and requested voluntary asset recovery to preserve collateral while usage violations were reconciled. We offered a neutral surrender location and window. In parallel, we informed my insurer that the listed usage had drifted, so my file reflected the correction. Paperwork speaks a language, feelings don't. I kept channels clean. HR got a short medical leave note with documentation and a coverage plan. No names, no family drama. Public would be for principals later, not for subtweets now. Meanwhile, I organized a single folder called Timeline Medical EMT Run Sheet Discharge Summary. Dr. Kwan's written note with my signed consent. Financial transfers, bank case numbers, credit, freezes, tri-merge, communications, exported family chat screenshots with visible timestamps. The IG story saved properly my HR confirmation. And context, the venue's written permission for the service corridor. Ring the hallway clip labeled context only, and the venue manager's email confirming consent and retention of their security footage. Every file had a date in the file name and a one-line purpose. If a stranger stepped in, they could follow it. We scheduled a family Zoom for Thursday evening. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so we didn't record. Alvarez took contemporaneous notes and circulated a written summary afterward. She ran it like a work meeting, medical facts, financial discrepancies, vehicle usage, and next steps, boundaries. She started where no one gets to argue. A concise recap of Dr. Kwan's diagnosis and orders attached with my written consent, and one sentence. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. She moved to the ledger, my family support spreadsheet summarized cleanly 2 years of dates and confirmation numbers. Then the bank case IDs and the overlapping hospital timestamps. No motive claims, only access and opportunity. On the HELOC, she described the suspension tied to the police report, noted, "I'm not on the deed," and outlined the lender's signature verification process. Motion stopped. Process engaged. For the car, she kept it contractual borrower duties, documented misuse payments, ceased under counsel, voluntary surrender, set for Friday dawn at a neutral lot. She read the surrender window and moved on. We didn't play the hallway clip. It's context, not a courtroom exhibit. Reactions followed choreography I could have written. My father tried misunderstanding, then went quiet when the EMT numbers came up. Ryan rotated through denial, bargain, and blame. That HELOC is Dad's thing. We can fix this in-house. You made money the center of everything. I kept my answer short. I'm not negotiating. Support ends. Surrender is tomorrow. Communicate through counsel. Aunt Martha called their group chat jokes gallows humor. Alvarez read the line about saving money if I stopped breathing and let the silence do the work. The meeting ended with a summary email, bullet points, dates, next steps, and one boundary line. All future communications to Stephanie should go through this office. Friday at dawn, the voluntary surrender happened exactly as scheduled. No drama. A secured lot, a clipboard, 2 men in windbreakers. Ryan wasn't there. He'd dropped the keys the night before at the designated spot per instructions. The driver checked the VIN, took standard photos, and winched the Euros onto the flatbed. A neighbor recorded, as neighbors do. I didn't share it. The lender emailed a receipt asset, recovered account, protected pending review. That paper was the only audience I cared about. By midday, the HELOC lender sent its suspension letter application frozen, pending signature verification address, restored docket number, assigned, no advances permitted. The bank issued provisional credits on the cleanest disputed transfers and escalated the rest for device log review. Every message had a case number. Every case number was a brick. Only then did I publish the LinkedIn post I'd drafted a lighthouse piece about listening and consent, no names, no subtext. Families and offices both need one rule. When someone says they can't breathe, you believe them. And when you act on someone's behalf, you get consent in writing. A few colleagues reached out quietly. A contact who'd been helping Ryan stepped back. Physics, not vengeance. 90 days later, the noise was gone. The HELOC application formally failed signature verification and was closed. The lender kept the address fixed and sent a final letter I dropped into the timeline folder. The bank reversed a portion of the transfers tied to the hospital window and kept the rest under dispute. The vehicle account settled into a boring status I could live with. Counsel still buffered all communication. Attempts at end runs, cousin diplomacy, sentimental voicemails wrapped around asks went to Alvarez and nowhere else. Life got simple. I moved into a small seaport place with clean morning light and kept my New York apartment for work travel. I returned to my VP role on a documented plan, then accepted a Boston-based CMO offer where I put boundaries in writing on day one. Clarity scales better than heroics. Chosen family replaced the committee I used to finance. Each month, Jessica and Callie come over for receipts night. 3 questions. Where did we overextend? What did we ignore? What needs a boundary? We write it down and set reminders the way we would for any other deliverable. It isn't dramatic, it's maintenance. If you're where I was, here's the part that actually holds. Keep one folder with dates in the file names. Separate channels: internal for operations, legal for consequences, public for principles. Ask permission in writing before you record anything. In a 2-party consent, state context files, stay context. Freeze credit early. Don't argue intent, prove access and opportunity. And believe people, including yourself, when you say you can't breathe literally or metaphorically. I didn't win anyone back. I didn't try. I protected my name, my credit, and my lungs. Consistency did the rest. And that's the sound of freedom when the room finally goes quiet.